Hi everyone, I'm Stella Assange. Welcome to our watch party from Conway Hall in Holborn, London. Today's event is called The Fight to Free My Husband, Julian Assange, and the panelists include Alexei, Sayle, Len McCluskey, and MPs Jeremy Corbyn, Richard Burgon, and David Davis. Thank you for watching. Please come to the Royal Courts of Justice on the 20th of February at 8:30 a.m. and also on the 21st of February at 8:30 a.m. And at the conclusion of the hearing on the 21st of February, we will also be marching from the Royal Courts of Justice down to Downing Street. So please join me, join the fight. It's now or never. Free Assange.
Hi, I'm Nathan Fuller, Director of Assange Defense here in the United States, and I'm welcoming you to our online watch party for this Conway Hall event in London, The Fight to Free Julian Assange, featuring Julian's wife, Stella, actor Alexei Sayle, Len McCluskey, and members of Parliament Jeremy Corbyn, David Davis, and Richard Burgon. As a reminder, Julian Assange is going to be back in court in London February 20th and 21st, where his extradition appeal will be considered.
Hi, and I'm Vince DiStefano. I'm the National Organizing Director for Assange Defense here in the States. And for those of you who can't make it to London, we are asking you to take action in support of Julian to have the extradition dropped in your own hometowns. Whether you're by yourself or with other groups of individuals, please get out, because it is so important that we halt the extradition and free Assange to save our freedom of the press. If you would like to work with other people, all you need to do is go to AssangeDefense.org and you can find activities in your area. Please join them. Please speak out. Please work to drop the extradition of Julian Assange. Please free Assange now. Thank you.
For joining us this evening for this important meeting, and can I welcome you on behalf of the Free Assange campaign. Julian Assange has just spent his 5th Christmas in Belmarsh High Security Prison. His battle against extradition in the UK courts will reach its final stage next month. The long-awaited Day X will be a 2-day hearing on February the 20th and 21st at the Royal Courts. And of course, we will be there in solidarity and to protest. Yes. Tonight we have a really excellent panel of speakers who will lay out some of the vital issues at stake in what has become the most important free press trial of the century so far. So first of all, friends, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, a man who is dangerously close to becoming a national treasure. He's only avoided that fate by his irreverence and his radicalism. So it's a real pleasure to welcome comedian and political commentator Alexei Sayle to introduce some famous footage made public by Julian. Welcome, Alexei.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is something of an achievement to be almost a public national treasure while being an unrepentant Marxist. So that's something to console myself with in these dark times. I am not going to speak for long, really. I just wanted to be here for this meeting. And I'm going to read a poem by Bertolt Brecht. There is a poem by Bertolt Brecht which can be read in any number of depressing situations. It's kind of reverse, kind of hallmark. So anyway, this is a poem by Bertolt Brecht. It is called In Your Country. He who speaks untruth is borne in triumph through the crowds, whereas he who speaks the truth needs a company of bodyguards, but will find none. I'm here tonight because I want to show my support. I want to be one of Julian's bodyguards in as much as I can. We need to have a healthy society, to have healthy democracy. We need a free and independent media. We have neither of those things, I think, at the moment. the legacy media during this current ongoing genocide in Gaza. The legacy media has been shockingly silent, cowardly, complicit. And it is only the internet where we get the truth. It is only the internet where truth tellers live. Julian was a pioneer of this, and he deserves to be rewarded for this. He should be. He should be like Duke Wellington. The grateful nation should buy him a house at the top of Marble Arch, perhaps. His reward should not be to spend his days in a US supermax prison. So in an ideal world, we have perhaps one of Julian's most famous revelations, the shocking, unfortunately, not as shocking as it was at first, I think, the helicopter gunship footage from Aya.
For more than 2.5 years, the wire service Reuters has been trying to find out what happened to their 2 staff members on this street in the suburb of New Baghdad. WikiLeaks says this is what happened. The voice on the tape, presumably a member of the military, says there has been shooting in the area and receives permission to open fire.
When people are labelled as insurgents, are they really insurgents? It seems to be the case that from scenes in this video, that any person that is not a man, and sometimes not a woman, is by default labelled as an insurgent.
From a distance, you hear the voices on the tape watch as the wounded try to crawl to help, but when help arrives,
in this video, I think you see the corruption of pilots and the military by war itself, in particular by the modern nature of aerial warfare. So you see these young pilots acting like they're playing video games, only the high scores they are getting are with real human lives.
even from high above, the harsh reality becomes evident as the troops that arrive find 2 children wounded. You see them carry their small bodies and call for help. The response on the tape. Patty Baldane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Shame on his Irish state.
Julian Assange, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight and thank the organisers for inviting me to speak. Unfortunately, I can't stay for the whole event. I need to get back up to Yorkshire as I've got a funeral first thing in the morning. But I really wanted to come tonight, to come to show my support, but more than that, to come to give my commitment to Julian, to Stella, to all those who believe in human rights and justice, that I will continue campaigning with you until extradition is dropped and until Julian is free. George Orwell once wrote that in a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And I often think of that quote when I think of Julian, because beyond all the headlines, that is what this case comes down to. In a world where lies have come to dominate our politics, we have a journalist who is, as we meet here tonight, being held in a maximum security prison in our country for highlighting the truth, who has been languishing there for many years, often in cruel and degrading conditions, as though he's a convicted criminal. Imprisoned not because he's charged with any crime in this country, but because of his journalistic work, which we've just seen. Because of his work to tell the truth, a truth that the powerful did not want the public to see, a truth about war crimes, of human rights abuses and breaches of international law committed by our government and its closest global allies. And now, because of that publishing work, we have the shameful situation where a journalist could be jailed in a US super maximum security prison for life, aided by the UK Home Secretary, who signed a warrant for his extradition to the United States of America. We simply cannot stand by while common practices in journalism, practices that have long served the public interest, are criminalised in this way. Because this case is not simply about Julian Assange and the work he did. Regrettably, our country has been involved in too many unjust wars in recent years. Much of what we know about the crimes committed in those wars, in Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, was exposed by the fearless work of Julian Assange. That's work that I admire, but that's not the point. This case is about a more important principle. I've brought together a cross-party group of MPs on numerous occasions over the past 4 years, has tried to raise awareness of Julian's case in Parliament and beyond. We've tried to get to visit Julian in prison because we were worried about how he was being treated. We've tried to pressure our Home Secretary to not sign the extradition warrant. We've called on the United States President to drop the extradition request, and we've lobbied the US Attorney General to do so likewise. One point that we've always made in building that broad alliance of MPs who have backed Julian, I think it was 40 MPs from 8 parties who wrote to the US Attorney General, is this. This does not stop with Julian Assange. This case, in my opinion, will have a chilling effect on journalism. And in my opinion, it's designed to have a chilling effect on all journalists. By choosing this course of action, first Donald Trump and now other powerful politicians in the United States, as well as our own Home Secretary, have sent a warning to journalists in our country and worldwide. It appears to be an act of intimidation. It sets a dangerous precedent for other journalists and media organisations. Let's remember that Julian was invited to our country by the Guardian newspaper. He worked with some of the biggest names in publishing, the New York Times, Der Spiegel, Le Monde and El País. His exposure of crimes that were being done in our name is a central part of the democratic function of journalism. And that's why Reporters Without Borders, the International Federation of Journalists, Press Freedom Group's Article 19, Index on Censorship, and the European Centre for Press and Media Freedom, as well as our very own National Union of Journalists, have all stated that Julian Assange, and I quote, "He's been prosecuted for exposing US rendition, unlawful killing, and the subversion of the judiciary." And that's why they have, that it creates a dangerous legal precedent, allowing any journalist in Britain to be prosecuted and extradited. It's why Amnesty International has labelled the case politically motivated and unjustified, and said that it undermines press freedom. And over the coming months, it's essential that we repeat those arguments, that this case is about defence of one of the great freedoms, the right of the press to hold governments to account. This case is a landmark moment, one that will see if our country wants to be seen as a beacon of a free press, or if it's going to allow the undermining of a core democratic right. We should also be very concerned about the extradition treaty that's been used to sign off the extradition warrant of Julian Assange to the United States. This extradition treaty, and so many others signed with the US, are often so one-sided that they allow the US to effectively police what happens in countries across the world. And I especially commend David Davis MP for his work on highlighting this in Parliament. Because when this legislation was brought to Parliament, in the first place, assurances were given that it would exclude extradition for political matters or for so-called political crimes. Yet that is exactly, I'm afraid, where we are. In closing, I want to briefly look at what's happening in Gaza. There we've seen over 100 days of Israel's brutal onslaught. And in those horrific events, we've seen only too clearly the importance of a journalism that is prepared to expose war crimes and human rights abuses. The images we've seen will haunt us forever, and they've helped the world see the real injustice taking place. We say that truth is the first casualty of war, and it's clear that there's a targeting of journalists in Gaza, with more journalists killed there, according to the Committee to Protect Journalists, in the first 10 weeks of Israel's war than have ever been killed in a single country over an entire year. That war again highlights why we need fearless journalism that exposes war crimes, that exposes human rights abuses, and why we need to protect fearless journalists. This is a time when the world needs more Julian Assanges. Yes. The world needs more of a fearless journalism of WikiLeaks, because, as Julian once remarked, if wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth.
Was General Secretary of one of the largest trade unions in Britain to unite the union. And in that capacity, he threw his support behind the campaign to free Julian Assange. Please welcome Len McCluskey.
Well, good evening, sisters and brothers, comrades and friends. You know, I was going to start my contribution by saying how happy I was to be here with you tonight. But I'm not happy. I'm not happy to be here. And none of us should be happy to be here. Because Julian should be a free man, living his life with Stella and his family, and engaging in what he does best, which is telling the truth to power. The fact that we're here after so many years, he's been in Belmarsh for 5 years. It's extraordinary when you think of it, that time has drifted by from those pictures we've seen of him being dragged in to this high security prison, that we are still here fighting for justice. I had the opportunity to visit Julian in Belmarsh along with Jeremy Corbyn back in September, and it was a humbling experience. There I was sitting opposite a man whose whole life has been dedicated to telling the truth, to make certain that the power brokers around our world were accountable for the actions that they did, highlighting the fact of the atrocities and the illegal things that they were involved in. A man who's done nothing wrong, a man who's actually provided all of us throughout, not just the UK, but throughout the world, the very basics of democracy, which is making certain that power has to answer and be accountable for what they do. It was a humbling experience, and I felt when I left not only a deep sadness that I'd left this man, but an anger that swelled up inside me, that we could continue to allow this atrocity to take place in our country. You know, this is a man who spoke truth to power. But this is what this is all about. The global establishment, led of course by the United States, have made it clear that they will not be answerable to anybody. How dare ordinary people ask them to be accountable for their actions? How dare people challenge their ability to do what they like? And that's what this is all about. The powers that be in our society, in our global society, do what they want. Illegal things that shock ordinary people. And it's what Julian brought to our attention. How many of us remember looking at the WikiLeaks announcements and the things that Alexei has shown us, and being shocked by it, and thinking, this can't happen, surely to God, somebody's got to call these people to account. Nobody did. And of course, America has made it clear that they intend to make Julian an example. For any other investigative journalist who wants to kind of expose what's going on in our world, that they shouldn't step over the line. Because if they do, they'll be dealt with in a manner that is nothing short of despicable and atrocious. And we've got to do something about it.
Yes.
You know, it's not just Amnesty International or the Human Rights Watch or the American Civil Liberties. There's a whole plethora of organisations throughout the world who've turned around and said, this is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. How dare you challenge a man for simply bringing to our attention what's going on in our name? That's what this is about. And it's absolutely despicable that Julian has to suffer in the most highly security prison in our nation for the atrocities that he is going through at the moment. Denied his warm embrace of Stella and his family. The same as all of us human beings, with our friends and our family, take courage and strength from. He's denied that for no reason. 5 years in a British maximum prison without any charges, because of course this government kowtows to the Americans who say, no, we'll be the ones that make a judgment on who is right and who is wrong. And we have to do something about it. Day X is arriving. It's been a long time. And we've got to do something about it. I appeal to all of you to go back to your trade unions. Make certain that the trade unions have announced their commitment to Julian's campaign. Make certain that we are not prepared to allow this to happen and for us to simply shrug our shoulders and forget about it, because that's what will happen. If he goes to America, we may never hear from him again. We have to make certain that we make enough noise. We have to write to our MPs. I'm so delighted, by the way, that I share this platform tonight with David Davis. David and I might disagree on some issues, but this is a man who has a reputation of integrity, a man who believes in justice and speaks out when justice is being challenged. And all of us need to do that. We need to make certain that what Julian has done, which is nothing but sin, not only our nation, but the nations throughout the world, is not forgotten. You know, there's a terrible danger when things go on for so long that it falls off the agenda. Of course it is. There's so many other things happening. Richard has spoken about Gaza and what's happening there. So many things fill our mind with the issues of today. But we've got to make certain that this most important issue, the freedom of the press, the freedom of open speech. Julian, of course, is not an American, in which case he could claim the First Amendment of free speech. He, nevertheless, is subject to the outrageous bullying and attack from the American government. We have to fight it. You know, colleagues, my experience tells me in life that the only thing that can make a difference, the only thing that can challenge what is happening, the only thing is people power. People coming together, people making enough noise about things that our representatives start to listen. Good to see my friend Richard Burgon here, and I wish there were more Labour MPs here. I wish we could get Keir Starmer to commit. I know this is disillusion, but we have to demand this so-called human rights lawyer who leads our party should stand up and make it clear that he's not prepared to put up with the attacks on this individual. Comrades, I know I'm short of time. My experience tells me that when people come together, it is possible to bring about justice. I come from my city of Liverpool, where the Hillsborough campaign fought very hard for justice, and they won. And we need to tell Julian that millions of people around this world will make certain that he will never walk alone. Let's keep fighting for justice.
Friends, I'd now like to welcome someone who has added his very powerful voice to the campaign to free Julian. Please welcome the MP for Halton Price and Howden, David Davis.
Len, I guess Alexei too, we agree on almost nothing. Except that this issue is bigger than all of us, and more important for all of us. You know, when, you're not going to hear these words often either, when Jeremy Corbyn died, went to America to get to arrange the release of the last British man in Guantanamo Bay. Ah, here he is. Well, he delivered this. When he and I went to America to arrange for the release of the last strip in Guantanamo Bay, somebody said to me in Britain, "Why are you doing this? This person's probably a terrorist." I said, well, firstly, no, he's not. But secondly, even if he were, he deserved a fair trial, not arbitrary incarceration. We say that for everybody. It doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what your religion is, it doesn't matter what your politics are, it doesn't matter what colour you are, it doesn't matter your origin. Everybody deserves a fair trial, fair justice, the same rights, the same freedoms that all of us have. And that's what this is about. That's what this is about tonight. But I want to face up frankly to the harsh reality. Let's be clear. If Julian Assange is extradited to the United States into the American judicial system, his chances of acquittal will be near zero. This is not really a justice system as you or I would recognise it. It's a justice system with a conviction rate of 97%, largely achieved by a plea bargaining system which threatens enormous sentences if you don't comply with it. In Julian's case, I guess the threat would be 175-year sentence. That's where it's been. And undoubtedly, when he was put on trial, did he refuse bail? Thrown into a cell with his access to his counsel and even to his own evidence, strictly limited, handicapping his ability to defend himself. He's already faced poisonous propaganda from the American authorities. The trial was preceded by him walking on camera in a prison overall, arms and legs shackled, with the explicit purpose of convincing the public that he's guilty before the trial even starts. And as for the prospective treatment, well, as we stand here today, roughly 80,000 American prisoners are in solitary confinement. If extradited to the US, Julian would almost certainly face the same. Now, the Americans have promised that that would not happen. They made that. Well, exactly right. The last case I dealt with, going to America, there were all sorts of promises around it, and two of them were broken the moment the deportee landed in America. So we can't trust that either. So what that means, what does that mean? It means he's not going to get a fair trial then. So justice for Julian Assange rests in our hands and our hands alone, in the British justice system alone. Now, what actually would happen if Julian was accused in Britain of the equivalent to the US Espionage Act, which is our official secrets act? What would Philip happen if he was here? Well, you know, we actually have some examples. Over the last 30 or so years, we've had 3 high-profile official secrets trials. And so we can get a good idea of how they will work. The first one was under Thatcher. Might recognise it. Was a so-called Clive Contin trial, the so-called Belgrano incident. And this man was a civil servant to the MOD, and he had leaked to the press, and no doubt he did, he'd leaked to the press the fact that the Belgrano was sailing away from the Falklands when it was summer. The British establishment was furious with this, and so he was put in court, put on trial for breaking the Official Secrets Act. And the judge instructed the jury, imagine that, instructed the jury to find him guilty. And the British jury, I won't render the expletives they probably thought, but they refused. They recognised that what this man had done was technically a breach of the law, but in fact was in the public interest. In fact was in the public interest. And they found him innocent. The next cases were under Blair. They were Catherine Gunn, you may remember that, and Derek Pascal. Catherine Gunn was, I think, an MI5 analyst, and Pascal worked in Parliament. And again, they leaked information, mostly about American activity, extradition and torture, spying on the United Nations, and spying on foreign heads of state and so on. And they were arrested and charged. But in each case, the prosecution realised that the British jury would actually find them not guilty. Why? Because what they had done was in the public interest, again. So whilst in British law, technically, there is no public interest defence, every single time it comes to trial, a British jury imposes one. That's actually what would happen if it was in Britain, if Julian faced the trial here. That's why I think the judges who are ruling on him have to think about that. They have to think, what is the reality? What is it that he's being accused of? And what if he were a British citizen? What if he were here? What would he face? What he would have faced is he would have had a trial, it would have been a fair trial, it would be over by now, and he'd be walking free on the streets of Britain, or home in Australia, where he was. Now, we've already heard about the UK-US extradition treaty. And Richard, quite rightly, I think, said that I had opposed it. I was overruled by the same leader of my party, but I opposed it. Because I thought it, frankly, read like the extradition treaty between an imperial power and a colony. It was long ways, and we basically had to do what we were told. No. There was in it, however, Article 4, which said, extradition shall not be granted if the offence for which extradition is requested is a political offence. And you know, Parliament only ratified that treaty because that clause was there. If that clause had not been there, I cannot imagine a British Parliament actually accepting them treaties. So, clearly this is a political offence. Let's look at what it is. What are the Americans saying about this? Well, actually, Vice President Biden said, quoted, I would argue that he is a high-tech terrorist, talking about Julian. This guy has done things and put in jeopardy the lives and occupations of people in other parts of the world. He has made it difficult to conduct our business with our allies and our friends. It has done damage. Well, of course, in reality, what is the sin that the US state deems a breach of the Espionage Act? We've seen it. Here, that video. The video showing American soldiers gunning down 18 civilians, including a Reuters journalist. The publication of that video and the publication of US diplomatic cables showing a US espionage against the United Nations and allied world leaders. It is, of course, ridiculous to pretend these acts of public interest journalism are crimes. In what world is public interest journalism exposing crimes a crime itself? Clearly not in any sensible world. Perhaps it's unsurprising that by 2010, Vice President Biden had actually changed his mind. And he publicly conceded that Julian Assange had inflicted no substantive damage other than to be embarrassing for the US government. Biden had gone from high-tech terrorist to somebody who embarrasses the US government. That's where they are. So the successful extradition of Julian Assange would effectively criminalise investigative journalism's espionage. It would set a legal precedent allowing the prosecution of anyone who breaks the duty of silence on classified American information and state-sponsored crime. It would impose American censorship on British journalism. And for what? In Joe Biden's words, to avoid embarrassing the American government.
Shame.
Legality aside. And so that's where we are. That's what we're considering today. And that's what the British judicial system should be thinking when they address these issues in the months on. That's what they should be thinking. And legalities aside, I should never forget, with any of these issues, any issues like this, you should never forget the human side of the episode, the human side of the issue. Over the last 13 years, Julian Assange has undergone a terrible ordeal. His punishment has been beyond anything he deserved, even if he was guilty, and he was not. I would refer the High Court judges deciding on Julian Assange's appeal to former Justice of the Supreme Court, Lord Sumption, who said, and I quote, "Freedom of expression includes the freedom to publish information, even if it's controversial, disquieting, or embarrassing to the authorities or to other people." That's what the judges should be thinking. Now, one of the reasons we are on the same panel, we're on the same side in this argument, is that our country believes itself to be a free society. We believe we have a free press. We believe we have a real court system that delivers justice. That's what we believe. It's time we lived up to our beliefs. Julian Assange is innocent. It's long past time we set him free.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker has relentlessly campaigned to free Julian. Indeed, he has spoken out again and again on this issue. He is the former leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight on probably the coldest day of the year in London so far. Getting a good turnout is very, very important. So thank you all for coming. And could we just say a big thank you to those people that have been involved in the campaign for Julian's freedom from the very beginning, those that have braved cold, wet days outside Belmarsh to make sure the whole world knows about it whenever they go past Belmarsh. And of course to Stella and all the campaigns for their incredible work, determination and the principles that they brought to this campaign. Thank you very much. We've been in this hall over many years. Some causes are popular, some are unpopular, some are very unpopular, and some are just disliked by all the media. We've been here through all of that in all of them. And the Assange campaign has gone on for a very long time. And I suspect whatever happens on day X is going to be going on for quite a long time after that. So be prepared to get to know each other very, very well. Because you'll get to like each other very much. And could I say thank you to all the other people, other friends that are speaking on the panels tonight. I heard Len and I know Richard Burgon very well. I want to say a big thank you to David Davis, not just for what he said just now, but his very principled stance in Parliament in support of civil liberties and human rights. We go back a long time. All of the students frequently disagreed with their own front benches. I've even disagreed with my own front bench when it was my own front bench. if you understand the subtlety of that particular message. And so it is important to also recognise the role that's been played by much of our media in this. Now, this is, by any standard, a global story. When a very well-known, very famous, very brave person, Julian Assange, uncovers deeply uncomfortable truths about a lot of things, not just the USA, about global corporations, about the horrors that went on in various wars, and about the way in which governments operate to try to silence dissent and opposition and the right to know. I ask myself, where have the majority of the British media been during all of this going on? Even when there's a case going on in the High Court, not 10 minutes away from their offices, who are the journalists there? They seem to me to be, and I've been there quite a lot myself, from every other country in the world except this one. Is it a problem they have over transport around London? I don't know. But I just hope that when we're there in February, there is going to be serious, detailed and extensive coverage of this absolutely crucial trial, because it matters to all of us. It's not whether you agree with or disagree with US policy on Guantanamo Bay, disagree, agree, Iraq, Afghanistan and so on. You do need to know what is being done in your name. You do need to know how those decisions are made. You do need to know what the consequences of those decisions are. And when David and I went to the USA in 2015 in support of people in Guantanamo Bay, we had a lot of very interesting meetings with people in the House and in the Senate, and it was fascinating actually to watch the workings of it. And we journeyed from office to office around the Senate building and the Congress building, and then we got to a meeting with John McCain. I must say I was looking forward to this one with some interest, but also a bit of trepidation. The only image I ever had of John McCain was him on television during the presidential campaign. And he came into the meeting,
He looked a bit grumpy, to be quite honest, but then he had good reason to be, and he later knew about his condition. He then spent about 10 minutes with giving a total diatribe against President Obama. We said, okay. And then somebody whispered to me, don't worry about it, he does this every morning. This is how he clears his throat, how he gets ready for the day. Then he settled down and we had a very good conversation. I haven't said anything during this at all because I was advised that my friends such as David, who have more military experience than I do, shall we say, should engage with John and see how it went. Then he looked at me and said, why haven't you said anything? I said, I was the expert. I said, oh, come on, you must have some opinions. And then he looked down the crib sheet he got in front of him about my political activities and record. And then he paused and he looks at me and he said, Mr. Corbyn, you've got quite a record. I said, no, does that affect your judgment? They said, no, not at all. I want to hear what you're going to say about Guantanamo. And we got onto that. And so here was a right-wing American politician who had been in the Vietnam War, Republican candidate, and so on, lots and lots and hundreds of things I would totally disagree with, quite prepared to agree with this very broad platform of British politicians that had come about why Guantanamo Bay was horrible, and is a horrible and evil place, and that nobody should be sent there. There should always be a process of fair, open trials for everybody all over the world. If he can do that, why can't Biden and why can't all the others where Julian Assange is concerned as well? That surely is a message we have to be able to put forward here today. And so I want to just add to this really by saying that this is about the role of journalism in the world. Now, our newspapers seem to me to produce less and less informative news, more and more of opinion, and all of our TV channels find global reporting more and more expensive, entertainment and opinion much cheaper to broadcast. And this is a real problem. So often, the world is much less well informed than it ought to be, much less information goes out, and as a result, we all know much, much less. I want to know what's happened to those journalists that have died paying the ultimate price trying to bring out the truth. 80 have already died in Gaza, many more have died in other incidents all over the world, in Colombia, in Congo, in Mexico, disappeared in prison in Egypt and many, many other places. And so I say to all our journalistic friends, if you want to be able to pursue your profession in the way that you should, to pursue the truth, to look for the real issues behind any particular story, and be protected in doing that, then you need to be standing with and supporting Julian Assange. Because if Julian ends up in a maximum security prison for the rest of his life in the USA, obviously that is abominable and appalling and virtually a life sentence for Julian. But it's also a message to every other journalist around the world. Just suppose for a moment you're a young investigative journalist in Ivory Coast, or Senegal, or Nigeria, and you've discovered that there's a waste dump that's dumping European waste there. And that's toxic, it's poisonous, it's dangerous, and it's damaging the watercourses, it's damaging the health of children in the area, it's leading to the environmental destruction of your community. You want to report about it. And somebody says, you want to be careful saying this kind of thing. There's some very big businesses involved in this. They're not going to like it. Remember what happened to Julian Assange when he reported on things that were unpopular. It's just a sort of idea that there will become a self-censorship of journalists all over the world because of the fate of the bravest one of them all, which is Julian Assange. That's why, one of the reasons why, it's very, very important to get behind him and get behind his campaign.
Okay.
we have gained international support for Julian in lots of places. In Australia, where he comes from, in this country, there's a lot of people giving support, not so much in Parliament, but there's an awful lot of people around the country. We've raised the issue in the Council of Europe, which I'm a member of, and we'll be raising it again next week when there's a session in Strasbourg, and we'll be having an event in support of Julian there. But other countries have also come out in support, and I was in Mexico last year, and I went to the daily media conference of the President Lopez Obrador. He invited me to come along as a guest to, he has a press conference for an hour and a half every morning on live television. It starts at 6 in the morning, but it usually runs much more than an hour and a half, sometimes 3 hours. He has a lot to say. He just said to me, would you like to say anything? And so I said a number of things, but one of them was to thank him for speaking out to the US President about Julian Assange. And then he repeated at some length, in some detail, how Mexico had consistently raised the issue both with President Trump and with President Biden, how he had already offered that if it was needed, Julian Assange would always be welcome in Mexico and we'd give him permanent residency to the Dutch Empire. Even when he had to come, he sent it through and just wanted to make that clear, as have a number of other governments around the world. So that support is actually growing around the world. And so we have to make sure it grows even more. So as we get ready for this hearing in February at the court here, let's make sure the whole world knows about it and recognise that if the case will, in all probability, end up at the European Court of Human Rights at some point, and we will carry on campaigning for it. But with Lena, I went to see Julian in the autumn, and we spent ages trying to get into the prison to see him. We got there and saw him, and it was an absolutely fascinating, very humbling time that we spent with him. We obviously talked about lots of things, talked about how he was feeling in conditioning team and so on. And I just left absolutely full of admiration for somebody that has been so long in prison, been so badly treated, so psychologically tortured just by being in a maximum security prison on top of the years he spent in the embassy, that he has survived, that he has that wonderful inquisitive mind, always searching for the truth and always looking for the information that will left behind. So on tonight's meeting, needs to send this message to Julian. We might be here in Conway Hall, it might be a bit cold outside and so on, but actually, Julian, we're with you and we'll be with you as long as it takes for you to be able to walk in freedom on the streets and go back to your very valuable work of finding out the abuse of power by the richest and most powerful in this world, the damage it does to the poorest and most vulnerable people on this planet, and why journalism, real journalism, is designed to make the rich, the powerful, the political classes and everybody else uncomfortable. Because if you hold office, if you hold a powerful position, you should be uncomfortable because you're holding it in trust on behalf of other people. I don't mind being held to account by journalists. I do mind being abused and lied about by journalists, but I don't mind being held to account because that is what journalists should do as part of an open, free and democratic society. That's why Julian Assange must be free. Thank you.
Hi, I think this is better because otherwise some of you won't be able to see me. Thank you everyone for coming. as Jeremy said, on the coldest day of the year so far. And I'm really privileged to be sharing this stage with such amazing speakers. And thank you, Kate, also for moderating. I usually start by talking about how Julian's doing. And the Christmas that we just had was actually the worst so far, because always during Christmas there are less visits, and he also got quite sick, although he's recovered. And then John Pilger died, and this was just such a terrible end to the year, because as you all know, I'm sure, John Pilger wasn't just someone that Julian admired professionally. They had developed a close friendship over the years. When I think of the two of them together, it's sitting at the table, sharing anecdotes and laughing loudly, and it's a real loss. And I think John Pilger's passing is really difficult, because when a person is in prison, you have to think about the things that you hope will happen when you get out, the things that you will do again. And over the years, the fact is that many of the things that you hoped would happen will never come to pass. Julian spending time with his good friend John Pilger is one of those things, and it's very painful. However, I think it's so important that that you and we continue this fight for Julian, but also in memory of those who are no longer here: Vivienne Westwood, John Pilger, Daniel Ellsberg, and many more, who dedicated so much of their lives to fighting for Julian's freedom on principle, but also because they cared about him as a human being. And it's very sad to me that they won't be able to see Julian free, because I do believe that we will get him free. Yes. So John Pilger's passing really got me thinking about the passage of time, obviously, as I just said, and also about how when I have interviews and so on, I say, well, this was back in 2013 or something, and a lot of these events I have in my head as if they were just yesterday, but when you think about it, it's 11 years ago already, 2013. And Julian was just 39 when WikiLeaks published the Chelsea Manning revelations. It was 2010, and he was 39. And then he was 41 when he got political asylum in the embassy of Ecuador. In 2019, he was 47 when he was arrested. And now, after almost 5 years, he'll turn 53 this year. That is a long time, from 39 to 53, without being a free man, and increasingly having your liberty restricted more and more to such a degree that now he's in a single cell for 21, 22, 23 hours a day, depending on the day, alone, and isolated from the world. And our eldest child, Gabriel, he was 2 when Julian was imprisoned, and he's going to turn 7. That's a long time. And this, when Julian isn't even charged in this country, when what he's actually accused of is completely ludicrous and antithetical to a real democratic, open democratic system.
It's not newsworthy, though, is it?
What's being done to Julian is by design. It is there to intimidate regular citizens, but also to intimidate journalists, people who are in the profession. And I think it's really it's there to give an example of authoritarian abuse to the world. And to claim that they can get away with it while saying that they're a democracy, or democracies, because this isn't just about one country. Many of you already know what Julian's accused of. He's accused of telling the truth, of practicing journalism. And, but he's beyond that, right? He's not just a journalist or a publisher. He's the most consequential political prisoner of our times. Because he reveals the incoherence, the contradictions of liberal democracies. What he revealed wasn't just, the way torture was institutionalized during the Bush years, or how the State Department was spying on diplomats at the UN in New York and getting their fingerprints and so on. It wasn't just that. It was also about how European countries like Sweden were getting into deals with the United States government behind the back of the Swedish parliament to avoid parliamentary oversight. So it revealed a whole system of avoiding democratic process, oversight, accountability. And that's the really embarrassing part, that it had been baked into the system the way power operates, because it's not like there was no reform afterwards. It was just embarrassing, like the emperor was caught naked. And one of the examples of the importance of the publications, in fact, Julian is indicted in relation to the rules of engagement in Iraq. And I think he faces 30 or 40 years just in relation to the rules of engagement. This was the publication of collateral murder together with the rules of engagement. Basically the rules that determine when you can kill a person in war. And Chelsea Manning actually did an interview with Louis Theroux, which is on the BBC, which is interesting to watch. And she really kind of explained her motives for leaking that information. And it's not just about how the collateral murder video that you saw was covered up by the United States, saying, oh, it was all fine according to our rules of engagement. As Julian says in one of the interviews is, well, if those are the rules of engagement, then they violate international law. It's not just that. It's about those young soldiers who are sitting in the helicopter, who are killing those people, who then go back to the United States or to Britain with PTSD, and then you end up with an epidemic of suicides, because these young men and women are put in a situation, a system that is corrupt, that leads to these kinds of killings. And only a tiny minority of people, even if they behaved in that way at that time, can live with themselves after that. So it's not just about the victims of war in the moment. It's the victims that war creates through the perpetrators as well. So anyway, I think from my standpoint, the support for Julian is amazing and incredible. And it's a global movement. It's here in the UK when we were around standing, doing the Hands Around Parliament protest. That was an incredible day. And we got 10,000 people, I don't know how many, but it took, we made a ring around Parliament on both sides of the Thames, holding hands in support of Julian's freedom. And this is mirrored all over the world. In Italy, I'm absolutely amazed by Italy because there are dozens of towns and cities that are proposing honorary citizenship for Julian, and he is now an honorary citizen of Naples. He has been approved to be an honorary citizen of Rome just yesterday. And they're aiming for 100 towns and cities around Italy to make him honorary citizen.
Bravo, Italy,
I'm going to Strasbourg at the beginning of February, and we're going to have an exhibition there at the European Parliament, displaying the dozens and dozens of awards that Julian has won for the highest distinctions in journalism, in human rights, of integrity. About 20 unions, journalist unions, have made him either full or honorary member in Europe, including the National Union of Journalists. And every few weeks I have to travel and collect a new award for Julian. There's incredible recognition for him, and don't let anyone convince you that no one cares, or that people aren't mobilizing, or that people are apathetic about this case. It's on the contrary. This case is the most talked about case in the world internationally. I mean, you had Lula da Silva opening the UN General Assembly in September, talking about Julian in his opening speech. He was third, I think, in the lineup. And the hall, with all these heads of state, just spontaneously erupted into applause. You don't get that normally. You don't get that ever. Julian is a symbol for the ability to tell the truth. And sure, different countries had different motivations to talk about him, but he is the most important political prisoner of our times. And he represents true democratic accountability. And his importance cannot be suppressed, not by the mainstream media, not by anyone. It transcends all of that, and that's why there's a global movement for his freedom. So on the 20th and the 21st, as you know, Day X is here. The hearing, which is likely the final hearing in the UK courts, it will be at the Royal Courts of Justice, and we need everyone to be there. All of you, and at least 2 other people that you can bring. And we're meeting at 8:30 in front of the courts on both days, and on the second day, the 21st, when the hearing concludes, we're going to march to Downing Street. So please join me on that day for Julian, for all of us, for the future of a free, open society where free speech and free press actually has a future. And it's now or never. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Stella.
Hello, I'm Vinny DiStefano, the National Organizing Director at Assange Defense here in the United States. For those of you who cannot be in London on February the 20th and the 21st, we are asking that you take action in your own hometowns, wherever they may be. Please show your support for freedom of the press by calling for the extradition of Julian Assange to be dropped. You can do so by going out to the streets or alone or in groups and raising your voice. The importance of this case cannot be overemphasized. Freedom of the press in the United States, as well as around the world, quite literally hangs in the balance on the outcome of this hearing. If you would like to join others in your own hometown, please go to AssangeDefense.org, where you can find an action close to you or start one of your own. Thank you for attending this event. Please raise your collective voices to free Assange now. Stand up for freedom of the press. Free Assange now. Thank you all very much.